How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, this shouldn't be a shock, right? Haros pleaded not guilty. It just happened now. Here they are right here. Jake Haro, Rebecca Haro, both have pleaded not guilty. They have been charged with the murder of their son, Emmanuel Haro. Now, if you guys have been following the case, this is not a surprise to you. This is what we've expected. Now, we did a show the other day, me and Joe Pangaro, and we talked about who will talk first, Rebecca or Jake. Now, you're going to start to see the evolution of our dialogue, because now we're at that point where you got the prosecutor, you got the public defender's office representing Jake, and then you also got a private appointed attorney representing Rebecca. So I got some questions here that have been asked of me. I'm going to toss your way, and then maybe later on today or tomorrow, I'll have a guest on. Thinking about bringing on either Gary York or Joe again. We'll see. But I wanted to jump in and answer some of these questions. So right now we got the plea. So let me put out there. So Jake and Rebecca Haro both entered not guilty pleas. This is a default plea at arraignment in most cases. Sets the stage for trial or negotiations. And this is where that video we did yesterday, you guys got to watch it. If you haven't seen it, there's a lot of information there about how this process starts to work and who they're going to put pressure on, who they're going to want to speak, and who they're going to want to have point at who. And our guess, we made a prediction, is Rebecca is where I believe they're going to focus, try to get her to open up and maybe form a negotiation with her. Now remember, each has separate legal representation. Jake with the public defender, Rebecca with a court-appointed private attorney. So one of the questions that came our way was, what does it mean when co-defendants in the same case each have their own lawyers? They're going to represent their client's interests, right? So you got the prosecutor and their case. Then you got Jake and his case. And then you got Rebecca and her case. And they are not representing as a dynamic parent duo. When they pled not guilty, they're pleading not guilty as individuals, not as a parent duo. So remember that. And the clients are going to want to do what's best. The lawyers are going to want to do what's best for their client. So when they pled as individuals. Now we start to see where this is going to go next. So again, why else would they plead guilty? Strategy over innocence. Not guilty pleas are often tactical, not literal claims of innocence. Keeps all legal doors open, including the option to change pleas later. And separate lawyers may shape different narratives, each protecting their own client. Question I got here is, how much of a not guilty plea is about buying time versus claiming actual innocence? And I believe really it is about buying time. It's about trying to see where the case can go, trying to see what's in that discovery, what's the evidence, what is the other side saying. So it's a very strategic move. And at the end of the day, they can go from not guilty to pleading the guilt with these conditions. So I think it is a very, very strategic move. And again, it's a plea of not guilty as an individual. It's not a plea as not guilty as a dynamic duo. Kind of speeding through these, because I'm hoping to have a show that can elaborate on this a bit more when I have my guest. I also got forcing the state's hand. So prosecution must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So this kind of forms into the strategy side. Defense can test the strength of evidence, witness credibility, and investigative process. That goes for both sides, because at one point you could have Rebecca and Jake going at it. And through discovery, defense teams gain access to all of the state's evidence, and separate attorneys can press the state from different angles. This could make for a very long trial if it does go to trial. That's why I'm thinking if we can get one side to flip, an honest flip, then our focus, or the focus of the case, could shift to where it needs to be, which in my mind is Jake. Why is forcing the prosecution to prove every detail such a powerful move for the defense? Because reasonable doubt, right? You're innocent until you are proven guilty, but the burden of proof can be extremely heavy. So what happens here, in my experience, and I'm not a lawyer, but I do deal with charges inside of the correctional facilities where I work, is if there's not enough evidence, it poses doubt. And the funny thing is, even if I know I'm guilty, let's say I'm guilty, then what I do is I attack the due process, anything related to the due process, the credibility of witnesses, the collection of evidence, the timing of, when paperwork is due, when evidence has been collected, how many hands did it go through? At the end of the day, I may not be able to have a case on if I did it or not, but I will attack the due process like you wouldn't believe. And you'll see this. I mean, you'll see when things start to become personable. Maybe at one point you could find Jake attacking Rebecca. If she decides to flip, they'll attack her credibility based on who she is and how she's now seen. So again, this becomes more of a due process concern, but it is very strategic. Let's see what you got before we plead guilty. Let me see your hand. So I'm basically all in. I'm going to put a bet in. Let's see if you're bluffing. And we know that's expected, guys. We've seen all this before, so this is not unique to us. Then we also got plea bargain leverage. Holding a not guilty stance preserves bargaining power, can lead to reduced charges or lighter sentences if evidence holds. Prosecutors sometimes use a divide and conquer approach, trying to flip one defendant against the other. And this is ideal, right? Because they're both represented by two teams. One's the public defender's office and one is a court-appointed private attorney. So again, it's the ideal conditions for the prosecutor to do the divide and conquer because they are representing individuals. The public defender is representing Jake and the court-appointed private attorney is representing Rebecca. So we have two individuals. They're already divided. Now we just got to do maybe fuel it a little bit. So if I was the prosecutor, the longer you keep them separated, the more you may have with the benefit of time on your side as the prosecutor. So all you got to do is fuel momentum, fuel doubt. Do what you can to not just keep them separated, but, make sure that they're no longer in sync. And could separate defense strategies push one Haro to take a deal against the other? Yes, because if they're no longer in communication, it's ambiguous as to what one side is going to do over the other. So eventually, the longer this plays out, the ambiguity grows, and eventually, even the person who said they were going to be very loyal may now push into survival mode because they'll be like, well, if they would have done something, they would have done it already. Why haven't they done it? Screw it. I'm going to do it for myself now. These are the moves I'm going to make. And they're going to also be pressured by their own legal team. Hey, stop worrying about Jake. Stop, Rebecca. You have to do for you. We saw the evidence. The evidence is on Jake, but there's stuff that we could do for you. So you have to think for you. We're not worried about Jake. We're not covering Jake. We're covering you. So you have even the pressure of their own lawyers that's going to say, hey, this is what's best for you. You're not thinking for two. You're thinking for you. And then you got, as I mentioned, challenging the evidence. So even strong evidence may be contested. Admissibility, chain of custody, we talked about how it was gathered. Defense attorneys may push to suppress or weaken key pieces. Expert witnesses, so forensic, digital evidence, medical professionals, they can be used to counter the state's claims. And two attorneys mean two different approaches to evidence challenges. So that's going to be unique too. Is the prosecutor going to try to go for both? Or are they going to feel, I'm maybe not going to get her fully accountable. I can get him dead to rights. So let's see what we can do with her right now. And then let's go ahead and then focus our case on Jake. But maybe she is someone we could try to settle things with. And again, that's if she's not the main culprit. I mean, that could easily switch if evidence was against her. I just really believe it's on Jake. So again, the prosecutors may think, hey, you know what? Let's do something with her. Keep her out of the mix because this could become extremely messy when we have everybody against each other. So let's get this team aligned here. And at the end of the day, now you have the prosecutor and the private appointed attorney that represents Rebecca working now to battle against Jake if this does go to trial. And then perception and oh, wait, did I get the question here? What kind of evidence do defense teams usually attack first when the case looks strong? Yeah, I think I discussed that prior, but basically, evidence like, where the crime scene took place, the collection of evidence, credibility of witnesses is a big thing. I think credibility of witnesses is the real big thing if they do have witnesses. But the one thing here, we mentioned this in the other episode, is Rebecca's got that false narrative. She put herself in the center of it. And we explored that in the last episode, but real quick, they're going to have to work out something with her first. I think the reason why she'll be holding on to that story is because she's concerned of the consequences. So maybe there's a way that all could be figured out. And then the last part I got is perception and pressure. Oh, no, I got two more parts. Sorry. Perception and pressure. So defendants sometimes hope a jury may sympathize or doubt certain details. A not guilty plea buys time for defense strategies. When separate counsels, or with separate counsels, each side could argue it wasn't my client, it was the other, which is what we kind of been discussing. And jury perception is influenced not just by evidence, but also by behavior, body language, and courtroom optics. So how does having two defense teams change the pressure inside the courtroom? It could become very confusing because you may have everybody there representing their own interests and maybe multiple cross-examinations. You know, you interview one suspect or the one person that's being accused, and then the next person wants to challenge what they said. And it could be a tremendous back and forth because in the process of trying to prove, you know, what happened to Emmanuel Haro, well, now you got to prove who did it. And both parties, if it ever goes to trial, is probably not going to want to take claim to that. So there is going to be a bit of a back and forth. And you got the lawyers that are going to do what's best for their client. So if they hear an angle from Jake that doesn't fit well Rebecca, they may decide, hey, cross-examination, I'm going to cross-examine. That's why it would be great for the prosecutor and Rebecca's lawyers. If this does happen, does go to trial, maybe they could start partnering up and really, get the person that's mainly responsible. And then obviously she's still got a high level of accountability. Don't get me wrong, but they could maybe work out something with her so we can get the person who really did it. And that will make it a lot less confusing for the people that's got to hear it. I mean, man, just challenge after challenge after challenge. The jury's going to be like, man, who's telling the truth here? You know, so if you could just kind of limit it to two sides, that would be great. But that would require one side to merge with the other. And in my opinion, it's going to be the prosecutor working with Rebecca, maybe even get her a chance to testify against the other. And now you got the prosecutor and the court-appointed attorneys that represent her working together. And I think they kind of knew that too. I think eventually that's why they wanted to make sure this is going to be done with no conflicts. I think eventually there would be a chance for the prosecutor to wind up working with Rebecca's lawyers if she does decide to flip. And the last part I got is the co-defendant dynamic. With separate representation, the Haros could build defenses that blame each other. A united front may fracture into finger pointing. This often shifts trial strategies and plea negotiations dramatically, and the prosecution may exploit the tension to their advantage. In cases with two defendants, do juries expect them to turn on each other or to stand together? I think it really depends on the case. I think for this one, I think his love is control. That's how he controls her. And she may be in love with him, but once the control is gone, once they're separated long enough for her to not feel the power of his influence, and that takes time, all because you're not physically there doesn't mean he's not physically there. Doesn't mean that she doesn't feel the pressure of his influence because, you know, he's been having influence on her for quite some time. So she has to start breaking free. Now, granted, this is just a perspective because, as I said, she could be just as guilty. But I do believe once they break her away from the influence and we kind of see, where it goes next, you're going to wind up having two sides versus the one. And I do think most people would expect, if there's enough pressure, for one to turn on the other, at least in this case. But I'm sure there could be some times where they are shocked. But I think in this case here, they're expecting one to turn on the other because there's just so much evidence, including that past history of Jake, which are going to be allowed to use. So I love your thoughts. I just wanted to post something up real quick. I love your thoughts on what I just put together. And I'll try to have a deeper dive with Joe or Gary in the near future. But as always, guys, stay safe.